I will start it.
Let me just, I need the, okay, the YouTube
you
channel.
are online. You are live. You can start, Savio.
It's recording?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. Well, good morning for the ones who are good morning. Good afternoon for our special guest in Greece. And maybe we don't know if we have anybody in the good evening time as we had yesterday, right, Danielle? We had the 3 time zones. But anyway, so it's Friday, the 22nd. It's been raining a lot in Salvador, but we have the pleasure of having here with us our special guest, Stefania Kordia, directly from the lovely island of Crete in Greece. So I'm going to introduce, talk a little bit about Stefania, but then Stefania, if you want to add new information, that will be fine. So we'll be, after Stefania presents about the text that she sent us, we'll be taking questions and comments from the group in the room here with me. And oh, there comes Poliana. Hello, Polly. And also the ones who are on the YouTube channel. So thank you all for coming. It's a great pleasure to have our colleague Stefania here with us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about her. So Stefania Kordia is a PhD candidate at the Hellenic Open University in Greece. She's been teaching English in various areas in Greece for approximately 15 years. Her research interests include alpha-aware pedagogy that she's going to explore today with us, teacher education and professional development, transformative learning, and critical reflection.
That's right.
She developed and delivered an alpha-aware teacher development program called ILF GATE standing for Growing Awareness Through English as a Lingua Franca, which was offered at the Hellenic Open University, the Hellenic Adult Education Association. So my internet today is a little unstable. So then if something happens with me, Danielle or Lucielle will, take over. But anyway, I met Stefania some years ago in some ELF conferences, and I had the pleasure to be together in these conferences with our Greek colleagues like Nikos Sifaxis, who happens to be her supervisor. And Stefania has been, despite the fact that she's teaching, and doing her PhD at the same time, she's been very productive and contributing a lot to the field in a context that is there are many similarities with our context, the Greek context. So then Stefania sent us the text that she published in the ELT journal in 2020, and the title of the text that she's going to explore today with us is Alpha Awareness in the Task-Based Classroom, A Way Forward. So then, Stefania, thank you once again, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us with the ILF Brasil group. So then we are very happy to have you here. And I'm going to pass on the floor to you. As I said, you can use it the way you want for 30, 40 minutes. And then after that, we establish a good dialogue. Thank you very much, Stefania. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, first of all. I've watched previous meetings with other partners, with other colleagues, and it was always very interesting for me to hear your views and see what people think, and of course listen to what the colleagues are saying, but also the discussion that takes place, in this group. This kind of community sharing is what will develop our field, and always when you have a discussion with colleagues, the good things happen. Always. This is something that happens in any field. So I was very much looking forward to it. You said earlier that I've been teaching for 15 years, and when people ask me, when they first meet me and they ask me what I do, I said, okay, I'm a teacher. Full stop. This is how I define myself, as a teacher, and then as anything else. It's before you came in, Savio, we were talking with Daniel and Lucy Elena, and we were saying that it's at least for me, it's a very good opportunity, while I'm working in a state school, because what you see there is the reality. When you write about teaching, or when you write about teachers, you have some idealistic, you may have some idea, in your mind that may not always be relevant, may not always be the truth. But when you write about teaching and teachers, and you are part of this world in your everyday life, things change. Okay, you have a different perspective, not only of practice, but also of the theory that accompanies practice. So you can be a mediator, between the two. And this is what I'm representing here. A person who mediates between the ILF academic world and the teaching profession in real classrooms. As far as I have understood as well, the context between the context of Greece and the context of Brazil share lots of things. Okay, the educational system sounds like the same. We also have a big bureaucratic system governing the whole education, the whole educational world. And this bureaucracy, as you know, causes a lot of obstacles, lots of challenges, lots of other issues. We also have a central educational system with curricula, with syllabi, with rules that we need to abide by. And we also, at the same time, we're having all these touristic, all this multicultural environment around us, and multilinguist environment around us, which and the two worlds sometimes don't coincide with one another. There are huge lapses, there are huge gaps sometimes between the two realities that exist in the same place. What I'm going to, Savio said earlier that I forwarded to you the most recently published paper of mine, the one in the ILF journal, about task-based learning and self-awareness. So my presentation today, of course, focuses on this paper, but from a little bit different perspective, while I'm also discussing my own PhD research. So I will start from the more general things about self-awareness, and then I'm going to narrow it down and conclude to the paper that I sent you in order for us to be able to have an overall view of the area. Let me share my screen. Savio, if you could please let me know when the
Yeah, it's showing now, Stefania.
Great, great.
Okay.
I've been thinking a lot about the title, of this brief presentation. You can see that it's Alpha Awareness in the EFL classroom. What changes in our practices and what does not? I often receive this question from people. Okay, Stefania, you work on ELF, so what's new with that? What is there anything new that we need to do? Do we need to change everything that we do right now? And my answer is no, we don't have to change everything, but we do need to change some things and keep some others. You can see the logo of Enrich on top of the screen. I'm also here to I'm also here as a part of the Enrich project, as a member of the Enrich project. This is a project that we're having at the Hellenic Open University, and we're working with other wonderful colleagues as well. Yasemin Beyhut in Istanbul, Lucilla Lopriore in Italy, in Roma Trem, Lily Caballero, of course, Luis Guerra and Ricardo Pereira in Portugal, Dina Chagari in Oslo Met, and the Computer Institute in Greece. So we're working together for like 3 years now on ELF awareness. We produced, we created a CPD course, Continuous Professional Development course on ELF awareness, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. You can see ELF awareness in my title. I know that Nikos Ipakis was here, and I watched, of course, his presentation. The one who invented, okay, who created this term, the ELF awareness term, together with Yasemin Beyhut. And I don't know if you can, if you have, followed the literature on ELF since, since 2010 or so, or 2015 or so, until now. But if you have, you would see that the ELF awareness term has spread around the world. Okay, everyone is using this term, but what does it mean exactly? Let me start by saying that I'm sure you all know that there are 2 major perspectives in ELF research. I've taken this distinction here from Barbara Seitelhofer and Henry Widdowson. They wrote a paper together in 2020 where they had where they described these 2 perspectives, these 2 trends in ELF research. You know that the first one and the oldest one refers to sociolinguistics. The other one refers to pedagogy, teacher education, and teaching and learning, and so on. But the most common word, what links all these papers, all these perspectives together, is the word change. Okay, both of these perspectives in ELF research talk about things that need to change for some reason. Sociolinguistic research, we all know, focuses on English, focuses on communication, and how the findings of empirical research imply that our thinking, our traditional thinking about what English is, what communication is, what what the skilled user of English is, needs to change, and why. They describe, for example, that the competent ILF user, as you know, has a lot of competencies in phonology, in pragmatics, things that make ILF discourse different than discourse, for example, in English as a native language. Research on sociolinguistics focuses, for example, on pragmatics, on lexicogrammar, and so on. And then our research on pedagogy draws on these findings, draws on the writings of people from a sociolinguistic perspective, and then we try to see what all these imply as far as teaching and learning are concerned. The research in pedagogy, the literature that focuses on those matters, also talks about change in mindsets, change in how people think, again, about English and communication, but as far as ILT is concerned, and then change in practices. I've written here change mainly in teachers' normative mindsets, or mainly in teachers' normative practices, because this does not concern only teachers. It concerns also, I don't know, people who work on curricula, who work on syllabi, people who work on language assessment and testing. It concerns teacher educators, you know, how the mindsets and practices of teacher educators need to change first, and then teachers. So this is a very broad area that we focus on. But the word change, okay, is the one that, in my view, links everything together, connects things. Now, as far as pedagogy is concerned, I'm sure that you've heard a lot of terms, okay? You've heard the term informed by Seidelhofer and Professor Widdowson, ILF-oriented. I've also heard the term ILF-friendly by, I think it's Martin Huey and other people. You've also heard the term ILF-aware by Nikos Ipakis, by Yasemin Beyhut, by myself, and of course by Savio and Alessia Coco and so on. What people, especially teachers, sometimes ask me is people who have read a lot of papers and so on. Okay, Stefania, people use different terms, but at the same time, they talk about similar things. Okay, so what's different in ILF-awareness? What's different from an ILF-informed pedagogy? What's different in ILF-oriented pedagogy? And my response is, okay, they talk about similar things, but in my personal view, ILF-awareness adds perspectives that not just adds perspectives, it focuses, let's say, that's a better word, focuses more on specific things. And we'll talk about those things right now. Let me show you just a very quick diagram on ILF-awareness. And Professor Sifakis talked about those things last time that he was here with you. What is ILF-awareness? He defines three major perspectives, the three major components. Awareness of language and language use, that we need to be aware, for example, how ELF works and why, of how the users of ELF use English to communicate with each other, how they negotiate the meaning, what strategies they use, the role of culture in people's interactions, and so on. The other component is awareness of instructional practice, that teachers and syllabi developers and developers of course books, for example, they need to be aware of the teaching practice. Okay, what people do in the classroom. Okay, people, when it comes to teachers, what methods, for example, they use, what aims they use, what activities they use, and why. So this is a major component of ELF awareness. And of course, there's the last component, last but not least component, awareness of learning, awareness of the learning processes. For example, like how significant it is to be a user of English and at the same time be a learner of English. Okay, how the ELF use impacts the learning process, or the identity of the learner as a learner and as a user of English, or the importance of context. Okay, where our learners use English, and so on. A very big dimension of ELF awareness is, of course, you know that, critical reflection, and last but not least, action research. These things here are also discussed by other perspectives like ELF-oriented learning, ELF-aware, ELF-informed. I think what's the thing that perhaps may differentiate ELF awareness is the emphasis on critical reflection. What does that mean? Okay, we need to focus on that, not only when we're talking about teachers, in teacher educational frameworks, in a seminar or in a workshop and so on, but also in the classroom, how we promote critical reflective thinking in the classroom for our learners. And what does that mean in terms of ELF? Now, this is also what my PhD research is mainly about, is what is critical reflection when it comes to ELF, when it comes to ELF awareness. And then we need to discuss, in order to address this question, we need to discuss what is critical reflection generally, and what's the difference between critical reflection and reflection, and what's the difference between reflection and critical thinking, for example, or just thinking. This is what my main research focuses on, and how we can move from teacher education to pedagogy when it comes to promoting critical reflection on ELF or in view of ELF, because this is not just an ELF thing. Let me just show you what it could imply when it comes to ELF awareness, both for teachers and for learners. But before showing you some keywords, some key aspects of critical reflection, let me just say that reflection means, in general, focusing on experience, what we experience as, in this case, what we experience as users of English, what we experience as teachers, what we experience as learners, in case of learners, or what we have experienced in the past, okay? For example, in the case of teachers, this includes what they have experienced as prior learners of the language. And it practically means, very short, it means moving from asking ourselves questions beginning with what, then moving to how, and then moving to why. We're talking about the what of our experience. What have we experienced? What do we know? And then how, okay, how what we know is it okay? Does it need to change? And how can we do that? How can we validate what we know? And then we move on to why. Why do I have this feeling, for example? Let me show you, for example, what happens in the domain, in the component of language, of awareness of language and language use. We can ask ourselves, as teachers and as learners, what is my definition of English? Okay, or what's my definition of communication, or linguistic error, or hundreds of things, or culture? How do I define that? Okay, and then how appropriate is that definition? In view of all the new information about ELF. Why have I formed this definition? This is the most important question. And most teachers, including myself, before entering the ELF world, if I was asked that question, what's my definition of English? I could say, okay, English. How can I define English? But then if you think about that, you can arrive at the definition, okay, illustrating your way of thinking. Most people define it, as we all know here, as what is English? It is the language that English people use. This is the most common, okay, and the normative, okay, definition of English. How appropriate is it? When we take into account, for example, when we take into account the world Englishes around the world, around the globe. How appropriate is it to have this definition when I am a non-native speaker and I use English all the time? Why have I formed this definition? What has made me think that English, the way I define it, is the English of the English people or the American people? Why not Australians, for example? Why not Canadians? Why not New Zealand English? Has it been the way I learned English? Has it been something that my parents said or something that my teachers said? Has it been something that I have seen in the course book and so on? What have been the sources of this definition, of the way I think, okay? And what would a more appropriate definition be? In my view, what kind of criteria would I use in order to form a new definition in view of all this new information that I may receive? How can I form it and why? So this is moving from what to how and then to why. Helps me engage into a critical reflective process. This is not just a matter of thinking critically about what linguistic norm is. But I need to move from what to how and then to why to see why I have been influenced, okay, in this way of thinking. This also means that I need to start exploring and analyzing what I experience as a user, what I think of others as users, what I think, for example, of a person who is from a British origin and is speaking English, what I think of him. Or what I think of a person who comes from another country and uses English, whatever way they use it. And how appropriate okay, how relevant is my way of thinking is in relation to information about ELF and so on. Why I think this way? What has made me feel, for example, that a British person is a better speaker than another one? Again, what would be more appropriate for me to think or feel? How can I do it? Why? This also involves thinking about myself as a user, what I think about myself, and how I formed this thinking, or how well am I thinking about it, and why I'm thinking or acting in a certain way. I've read lots of times in papers and have heard in presentations, people talking and saying that people, ELF users feel embarrassed, or that learners feel embarrassed about themselves. Okay, we need to see that. We need to see how this is going to be a topic of discussion, in the ELF-aware classroom. And what has influenced these perceptions and why? Okay, has it been something that I said, to see that the deepest assumptions that underlie this kind of embarrassment. And for example, people may think that it's the way they were raised. As far as I'm concerned, for example, the way I was raised, I was raised as a learner of English. I was raised thinking that, there is a model there, and you have to be like them in order to be accepted. Okay, this is a matter of acceptance then, and this kind of psychological. Why do I need to be accepted this way? And what does it mean about myself? If we want to move on to the other components, of ELF-awareness, it means looking at my role as a teacher, in view of ELF, in view of World English as well, and of the role of my learners. Of course, this area is very broad. What does it mean to be a teacher? What's my professional definition of that? Or how appropriate is it? Why I formed this definition as again, and how I can change it and why. When I started, thinking about ELF, I felt, as a teacher that, okay, Stefania, what's your role? Is it to make students speak as well as possible, make them be as fluent as possible, make them be make their language be error-free? What's my role? I said, okay, it may not be this way, but what if I don't pay so much attention to grammar, for example, or to mistakes, to errors? What would that imply about my role? Perhaps it would imply that my fellow colleagues would not approve of me or of what I do. Am I okay with that? How do I view my part in this regard? Can I still go on, or can I change what I do? These are questions that I can't provide answers to, of course, because everybody has to think about themselves and then explore this. This is what the critical reflection involves. It does not have absolute answers, yes or no, but it paves the way into finding your own answer to things. And this is what brings us to action research, and of course, in a way of redefining your view of learning, of your learners, okay? Because this also implies starting to explore what learning involves. What does learning mean, and why? Most most of our schooling, refers to a little bit superficial ways of learning. But then, for example, mechanical learning or additive learning, when you add information, you add knowledge. But then there's other kinds of learning as well. Have I, as a teacher, integrated, for example, other forms of learning, like the most advanced ones, or the deepest ones, like like accommodative learning and transformative learning? These are things that I need to see as a teacher in order for me to be able to start seeing what I can do in practice. I'm not going to focus very much on what happens on the teacher's mind, but I had to pave the way in a way for me to discuss what happens in the classroom. Now, critical reflection never comes alone, okay? It always has a purpose. The purpose is not only developing myself, but also developing what I do as a teacher. This is why we all focus on both mindset and practice in all perspectives. The actual product of what we think, okay, is our classroom, what we do in the classroom. And action research is a very important part of the ILF awareness framework, because we need to experiment it, okay? We can't expect ourselves to be able to go into the classroom and change the world. We need to take small steps at a time, see what works, see what doesn't, and start visualizing things and start improving and so on. This is the whole process of action research: planning, implementing, and then evaluating and reflecting. So what does planning may imply? We all know this is the cycle of action research. It means planning my actions. It means trying to put my new perspective, okay, about myself as a user of English, as a teacher, and my learners. How can putting that perspective into practice, or translating my perspective in immediate teaching practices? And we know that this involves setting my aims, what exact aims my lesson should have, and what activities I should use, and what kind of assessment policy I'm going to have, and so on, what my own role will be throughout these activities, and so on. But it means creating a whole lesson, a whole plan, and a new action plan for my classroom. And this is the most important thing. It's also the most difficult thing as far as I'm concerned. Then it moves on to implementation. You all know the term reflection in action from Donald Sean. When we teach, we never stop thinking about what we're doing and what we can do better. We teachers always have, we're always alert on any response, okay, from our learners. We're constantly worried whether we're doing what we were supposed to be doing. So we always think how the lesson is going so far, how my learners are responding, and what I can do in order to make sure that my aims are achieved. So it's teaching itself is very hard, in terms of cognitive processes that are happening at the time. And this is why it's very tiring as well. But then when we get out of the classroom, we can reflect on our experience, reflection on action, thinking back to what happened, and then starting reflecting on that, and see how my lesson went, how my learners responded, what were my aims achieved, what were the strengths of my lesson, what did I do that I liked, what I did not like, was my new perspective illustrating that lesson or not, or to what extent, or what improvements I could make possibly. These things sound very, in my ears at least, they sound a bit theoretical. Okay, as a teacher, I would say, okay, Stefania, what you're saying sounds nice, but what do you mean? What aims should my lesson have? What activities should they use? This is the most difficult part. You're not being specific here, and this is what teachers, in Greece at least, always say about people in academia. They speak theoretically, and they have no idea what happens, in practice. That they talk about principles and so on, but they never or almost never talk about actual teaching. The question that I receive lots of times is, what aims would self-aware teaching have? Stefania, are we changing our aims? Are we changing our objectives of the lesson? But the CFR, the communicative, the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages in Europe specifies a set of aims and a set of objectives regarding my teaching. Do I need to forget about that? I'm not allowed to forget about that. My response is always no. Who said that we need to forget what we have been doing so far, or abandon what we're doing so far? Who says that the CFR is totally unrelated to 12? Nobody. It does have some, okay, I'm not going to say drawbacks, but it does have some, some normative perceptions, reflected in it, but still, it's very useful. It's a wonderful paper. It's a very influential document, okay? And we need to keep that in mind. And anyway, in Greece at least, and other European countries, this is what we formally need to follow. So we don't change anything. What we can do is read between the lines. What we can do is use the aims of our national curricula and syllabi and translate them into ILF-aware teaching. Or what does that mean? Or it means using ILF, okay, our knowledge about ILF, my new perspective as a teacher, and so on, my definition, my role as a teacher, or the role of my learners, and enrich somehow the aims that I'm currently having in my teaching right now. This is not very difficult to happen. Let me show you what I mean in practice. When we say that, you can see my title here, from EFL to post-EFL, or ILF-aware teaching, this is exactly that. We don't abandon things. We don't forget about things. We view things from a different perspective, or we try to modify or enrich things. and move from traditional EFL to post-EFL. Things that I'm going to show you here have been taken from the Enrich Continuous Professional Development course, from things from a section there that I wrote. So this is what we include here. You know, the CFR, the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages that we all use in Europe, describes in very specific terms some general competencies that language teaching needs to include, needs to be able to develop, to promote, in the classroom. It refers, of course, to all modern languages, but of course, primarily it refers to English. And let's see the relevance of these competencies to ELF-aware teaching. The CFR says the general competencies that we need to promote in teaching include sociocultural knowledge and skills. They define it as knowledge of the community where the target language is spoken, including the ability to relate to and act according to its sociocultural norms. Now, this may imply a lot of things, okay? What is community, for example? What does target language means? What's what the sociocultural norms refer to, and so on. We can view this aim, the same aim, the same phrase here in different perspectives. We can define community as the native speakers community. We can define sociocultural norms as the norms that refer to native speakers only. Or we can enrich this definition of community and include, okay, not only native speaker communities, but also the communities of practice of the ELF world, of ELF interactions. We can develop, for example, knowledge of how the interactions between two specific people, a Turkish people and a Greek people or a Brazilian people, how this small community of ELF users works, how we use our cultural norms in this social, situation. It depends on how we view the term community. The CFR also talks to us about the importance of language and communication awareness. It says that EFL teaching, okay, or teaching French or teaching Spanish and so on, needs to help the learners understand how language works and why in various real-life communicative situations, without actually defining, okay, what these real-life communicative situations refer to. But this is very relevant to what we do. This is very relevant to ELF-oriented teaching, or to ELF-informed teaching, to ELF-aware teaching, all of these perspectives. Understanding how language works, how ELF works in our case, and why. What's the difference between ELF discourse and ENL discourse in terms of pragmatics, for example, or phonology, and why? And this is what metalinguistic awareness involves. This is not a new term, but it's a term showing how we need to develop the explicit knowledge of our learners, not in terms of language, not just using the language, but also understanding why the language works this way in various situations, and how this changes when the context changes as well, which is especially interesting when it comes to ELF. This is also what the first component of self-awareness involves, awareness of language and language use, okay? This is, as I said earlier, these phrases here are taken from the CFR. So we are using the same aims, but adding to them things that refer to ELF, or we add to them insights from ELF research. We don't forget about them altogether. The CFR also tells us that we need to develop lifelong learning skills. We need to help the learners develop the ability to learn, the ability to know how they learn. This is how they define metacognitive awareness, knowing, learning how we learn, and if we want to think about it a little bit in deeper terms, know how it is developing an awareness of how we learn, how we know things. For example, how we know the native speaker, how we define that is the native speaker, or how we define the non-native user of English, how we define the linguistic error in language use. Knowing how we define these things involves going through a metacognitive process of thinking about how I think, which leads, okay, which helps you develop your self-awareness, awareness of how you feel, how you think, how you act, what you want to become, what you want to be, what's your identity, because this is a matter of identity when we're talking about metacognition and self-awareness. What's your identity, not only as a learner, not only as a user of English, but also as an individual, you know, in view of all these things, all these changes that are happening around you when it comes to communication. And the CFR also talks to us about beliefs that we need to help in the English classroom or the French classroom, so on, that we need to help our students, recognize the value of ethics, for example. They need to have values and positive attitudes. They need to be open-minded. They need to develop a tolerance, some kind of tolerance to linguistic and cultural diversity. They need to develop critical thinking skills, but they're too general. Okay, these terms are very general. When it comes to self-awareness, the definition can be a little bit more specific. For example, what does critical thinking imply? Critical thinking in relation to the well-established ideologies about the native speaker, about the definition of word English is, for example. All these things that critical pedagogy teaches us, that we need to be able to find inequality in some social areas and see how this inequality works, see how this inequality affects us as part of this community, and what we can do about removing all this inequality in our social environment. This is highly relevant to self-aware teaching. This is highly relevant to ELF itself. So the common European frame reference that we use in Europe, but I'm sure that in Brazil, you also have similar documents. These documents pave the way, in a way, if we view them from a different perspective. Moving on to language, okay? Of course, the CFR and other curricula talk to us about communicative language competences. I agree that most of these competencies refer to normative assumptions about normative conceptualizations of English and communication, but once again, we can view them from an enriched perspective when it comes to ELF. Linguistic competencies, this is a major part of our teaching, that we need to develop our learners' linguistic competence. We need to help them develop and be able to use language structures effectively. For example, vocabulary, lexes, grammatical structures, phonological forms, and so on. Again, I'm going to refer to a question that I often receive from teachers, and I also discuss in the paper that I sent you for your own reference. The issue of grammar. What do we do about grammar? In teaching, while we teach a language, we cannot do it without paying attention to norms, okay? Because communication itself is based on some kind of norm, okay? We all know that in ELF interactions, this norm gets transformed in a way, okay? But the norm is still there. It gets transformed in a way that suits each communicative situation. So this is exactly what we need to include in our teaching, you know, helping our teachers, helping our learners see how they can use the norm to their own advantage, how they can transform it any way they like, even when it means making a mistake, even when it means ignoring a mistake. I sometimes I say to my students that errors, mistakes are there only when we see them, only when we pay attention to them. In any other case, they're just parts of the language, okay, parts of the experience. And I also tell them that even I, being a teacher myself, have lots of times used a form that is not proper, that's not correct in terms of native speaker norms. And I've done it on purpose, because this is what this is exactly what I wanted to use at that point. Because if I didn't, and if I used the proper expression or the proper pronunciation or the proper grammatical structure, I wouldn't be able to achieve my communicative purpose at that time, at that specific time, with those specific interlocutors. So we need to be able to teach our learners how to use the norm, okay, to their own advantage as ELF users. That doesn't mean that we need to forget about norms altogether. Moving on to sociolinguistic competencies. As we said earlier, a major part of communicative language teaching, okay? How to use the language appropriately depending on social context. Let me repeat here that I've taken these phrases here from the CEFR, the Communicative European Framework of Reference. They're not my idea. They're my official curriculum as a language teacher in Greece. Okay, so what do they say? They say that I need to teach my learners how to use the language appropriately depending on social context. They may mean, okay, that this social context refers to native speakers, but it's okay. I can enrich the definition of a social context, okay, and include the social context that happens within an ELF interaction within an ELF community of practice and see how these people, for example, use idiomatic expressions that they create on the spot. That doesn't mean that I will stop teaching idioms or British idioms altogether, but it implies that I will try to teach my students how to create idioms with their interlocutors together, okay? And how this kind of negotiation may in fact lead to effective communication at the end, depending on what I want to do. Pragmatic competencies, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, negotiating the meaning in communicative interactions. This is again what the CFR places emphasis on: how to be flexible, how to be creative, how to respond to the other person's needs, which is what accommodation is all about. But we need to be aware here that we need to be careful here to include ELF contexts. Okay, what accommodation means here. What I did in my interaction that I mentioned earlier, when I used an incorrect form on purpose, was part of the process of accommodation to what the needs of the other person were. This is how I negotiated the meaning with him at that particular point of our interaction. So these competencies here are precisely what ELF awareness implies in terms of language and communication. And of course, there's in the most recent document of the most recent version of the CFR, it refers also to plurilingual and pluricultural competence, how we can explore and how we can take advantage of our repertoire of communicative codes, of communicative systems. This is what translanguaging refers to when we talk about ELF-aware teaching. How we can use Greek, okay, my mother tongue, how I can use a Brazilian expression, and so on, in order to help my communicative purposes each time. This is a small table here, again taken from Enrich, from sections that I wrote, that in very brief note terms makes a distinction between typical EFL and post-EFL or ELF-aware teaching, meaning how we can move from normativity, how we can move from normative teaching towards post-EFL perspectives, towards towards incorporating ELF-aware principles in our classroom. Okay, we're talking about the learner's needs. Okay, this is something that we all understand. We don't talk anymore about communication mainly with native speakers, but we also include non-native speakers, or we include mainly communication with non-native speakers. It implies enriching, okay, my overarching goal from native-like competence, which is a goal that is totally unrealistic, because we can never be natives anyway. So what does native-like imply? But this is a buzzword in EFL teaching. We move towards communicative capability in ELF. This is a term that has been composed by Professor Widdowson and Barbara Seidelhofer. And we combine that communicative capability in ELF meaning, for example, how to negotiate the meaning with another person. We combine that with what? With critical awareness as a user of English. That doesn't mean that only about English. It means about being able to think about myself and how I can develop myself as a user. For example, as we said earlier, how I can identify my feelings regarding being incompetent or being not very good or proper as a user of English, and why, of being embarrassed, okay? But why I'm feeling this way, and what has influenced me, okay? What has made me form these feelings, and what do these feelings imply when I'm using English, or what do they imply when I'm teaching English if I'm a teacher, and how do these feelings influence my self-image, my self-concept? How do they affect my psychology? And how I can remove these feelings, how I can overcome them. This is what development involves. This is what we call critical awareness or critical self-awareness better. In practice, when we are in the classroom, it means exposing the learners not only to native speakers, but also to non-native speakers, including learners themselves. This is a thing here because the learners are already exposed to ILF discourse. It's not something new to them. We don't need to expose them because they are exposed to that already. What we need to do is bring that to the classroom. One of the premises of EFL teaching was to help to ask the teacher to create a native speaker environment in the classroom. But this is not realistic anymore. What we can do is create an ELF environment in the classroom like the one the learners are used to in the real world. It means asking them to use ELF or use it more appropriately, use it more effectively, and helping them become not only highly competent users of English, but also more self-aware teachers of students and users of English. This is what self-aware teaching implies. And then people say, okay, Stefania, these are all very nice, but what could an self-aware activity look like? Very, very quickly, I'm going to show you 3 activities. People tell me, Stefania, what happens when my course book is very native speaker oriented? I said I always say we can't change course books, all of them. We can't always create activities on our own. What we need to do is sometimes follow the course book and then enrich it a little bit. This is an activity again from the Enrich project that I created. It's a very typical activity. We find it in course books all over Greece and all over Europe, and perhaps in Brazil as well, talking about London, focusing on reading, focusing on vocabulary and so on. And what can we do? We can teach this text here, but what we can do is change our perspective on this activity and start a reflective dialogue with our learners afterwards. For example, have you ever been, or would you ever go to London? Why? How are the English people represented in text? How is their culture presented? Start asking questions, okay, and see what the impact of that text was for the learner. Okay, what their views are, and try to see what stereotypes they may be having and how we can help them overcome those stereotypes. And what does it mean about English? For example, you can see that in that fourth bullet, what do you think about the English of British people? What do you think about the way you use English in relation to the way they use English? Why? And what is good English to you? And why? Again, remember the process of critical reflection, moving from what to how and then to why. Why do you have this feeling? What has influenced your perspective of that? What kind of English would you use? With whom? How would you overcome any obstacles you have? I've included here lots of questions, of reflective questions one could ask the learners, one could use in order to initiate a reflective dialogue with the learners. It doesn't mean that we have to go through all of them in just one session. It's just questions that may inspire us, a list that may inspire someone to elicit the learner's views. This is the actual purpose. We can use a normative text, but then move beyond it, move beyond normativity. That's the second activity. We use videos all the time, okay, in our teaching. Why not show them the video of non-native speakers and actually help them to notice things in that language and discuss them, to observe and evaluate things on those videos. Okay, it says here on number 3, based on your experience, what features do you think the language of that those two speakers in the video have and why? The learners themselves watch hundreds of videos all the time, so we can ask them and they can provide themselves videos, okay, where you can see ILF in action, real videos that motivate the learners. And this is what they do anyway in their real life. The third activity comes from some papers I had written a few years ago. I've used the Backbone project from this an excellent project by Kurt Kohn and his colleagues a few years ago. You can ask them to, again, through activities that we are all familiar with, like multiple choice, like I'm doing right now, to notice things, to notice, for example, how people react, in question 1, how people react to mistakes, or how people use repetition, like in question 2, and why, whether they have used this repetition, this strategy, because it's a strategy, in their personal life, and how. You can use, I've used another video here from Backbone. The reporter here, the person here uses Turkish, okay, to say a bit, to discuss her life. Her accent is strange, so we can focus on that. Or we can focus on translanguaging and paraphrase and so on. What I meant to discuss here is that we don't need to change neither our aims nor our teaching activities or our teaching processes and techniques. What we need to do is slightly view them from a different perspective, okay? Adding ILF, adding reflection, adding critical thinking, adding the learner's personal experience, as users of English, and helping them develop their self-awareness, because this is what ILF awareness implies, self-awareness. That was a little bit longer presentation, Savio. Thank you for being patient with me. When I talk, I forget to stop, as a typical Greek.
Thank you, Stefania. I didn't want to interrupt you because it was so interesting, and actually, it was more of a class than a simple presentation. But it was very rich because I think you bring this even though we are more or less familiar with ILF awareness and the project, but I think the way you brought and summarized, and also with practical activities, I think it's very, very rich. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but it's okay. It's part of the game. As I said, this is something very informal, and thank you for taking a lot of your time to prepare that and present to us. All right. Okay, I'm going to, I know that I had a few questions just to, not questions, but compliment, comments to compliment, but I'm going to pass on to the other people that don't know you as much as I do to interact with you. I think Poliana here has a question for you, and I think Julie, I don't know if Julie has a comment. And then if time allows, I will ask you a question based on the text, because I was curious about, when you discuss test-based, there is, I think this putting together ILF awareness with test-based is extremely interesting and insightful. And looking at the context that you post here in the text, where you have students who are potentially, that's my assumption, monolingual, and students who are at least bilingual in the same class. So they spoke Greek and also Serbian, right? And Albanian.
Yes, and Albanian, but I regard them as being, all of them, as being multilingual learners, because there's also their mother tongue, not only their mother tongue and English, but also the other foreign languages that they learn at school. They also learned French and German. This adds, to their linguistic repertoire.
Yeah, to the
so
linguistic.
they can use French and German expressions, or any other expression in any other language they have, in order to produce discourse in English as a lingua franca. So what my presentation here mainly referred to is how we use the same principles as in TBL, the same principles, but view them slightly from a different perspective. But the principles are the same. When they say that, when those principles refer to language as a social practice, this is a principle that we can also use. It's very relevant to what we do. When task-based learning refers to engaging the learners in interaction with one another, this is what we also do.
Right. Yeah, my question was, well, since we have already, Poliana, just give me 2 minutes, please. In the text, when you mentioned, for example, I was curious about the use of translanguaging to perform the tasks. How did you know? I don't know if you paid attention to these details, but let's suppose you have, you said you have 12 students, if I'm not mistaken. 7 were what we could call multilingual, or at least bilingual. Yes. And I assumed that the other ones were Greek monolinguals, right?
Yes. At
So
home.
when it came, my question is, when it came, I don't know if you paid attention to that, when it came to interacting and using translanguage in the classroom, did you notice differences? Of course, they were all trying to speak English, I understand. But did you notice any difference in terms of being more, I don't know, be more active, or in terms of using the skills and accommodations? So the two groups, did they perform similarly, or was there any difference? Or, for example, the bilinguals who already spoke more than one language, were they more, let's say, active in translanguaging, or did you notice anything related to these two groups?
It depended. Yes, because I paid special attention to that. It depended on who we're talking to each time.
Right.
Because if there were two students who were in the same French class, or two students who were in the same German class,
right,
they could use that knowledge, okay, to their own interaction, and say, for example, as I'm saying in the paper, no, mon ami, I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm not
mon
Spanish.
ami,
This is no mon ami.
yes,
I'm not Spanish.
Of French, because they absolutely knew that the other person already knew that phrase, so they would understand it.
Right.
Along the same lines, other people would use Serbian.
Right.
Because they knew a simple phrase. Okay, I'm not saying whole phrases in Serbian. Keywords that they knew that the other person would understand. So it depended on who they were talking to each time, which is exactly
so they had this awareness, right? So they were sensitive. They were sensitive to the interlocutor.
Yes, but they did that instinctively. This is why I'm talking. Yes. This is why I'm talking about the translanguaging instinct, as defined by Leeway.
That's Leeway. Yeah.
Yes. Because I didn't teach that.
Right. I think it's like putting together the two concepts of natural translanguaging and pedagogical translanguaging, right? So and then since this reality is very common to them outside the classroom, once they come into the classroom, they bring this, and the teacher, once the teacher motivates, it stimulates such practices, things go along much better. Thank you, Stefania. Okay, so then I'll pass on to Poliana now.
Hi, Poliana.
Hello. A very good afternoon to you there in Greece, Stefania. It is a great pleasure to hear and learn from you today in our group. So thank you for that. You know, guys, Stefania was the one who gave me the chance to join the Hellenic group, the Open University group, and be a participant of Enrique's CPD course. And I just couldn't miss out this opportunity to thank you once again, Stefania, for that opportunity. I'm really, really grateful, right? It was possible to learn from your text that TBLT, the task-based language teaching approach, contributes to the integration of ILF in English language classes, especially because this approach offers an opportunity for natural language learning inside the classroom, right?
Yes.
It prioritizes, for example, meaning over form, without disregarding the learning of linguistic forms, and also helps the students develop their communicative abilities. Based on this, Stefania, my question is, what is the role of linguistic forms in a self-aware TBLT approach? In fact, you have already mentioned something related to this during your talk, but it would be nice if you could emphasize this point.
Thank you, Poliana. This is, as I said earlier, this is the most popular question, okay, that people, that teachers as well ask, okay, what happens with linguistic forms? Speaking as a teacher myself, and I'm only talking about my own perspective here, we can definitely not disregard linguistic norms, simply because communication, simply because language itself includes norms as well. You can't say an expression without using a grammar, for example. You can't use language without somehow using some phonological forms. This is language. What happens here is how we view the definition of norm and how we view the linguistic error, because this is a matter of errors now. I'm not saying that I'm not going to teach tenses. I'm not going to teach gerunds or infinitives. I'm going to keep teaching exactly what I was teaching before being before entering the ELF world, the ELF, before learning about ELF. Let's say that way. I'm still teaching the same content, okay? But I have enriched the way I view grammar itself. I have enriched the way I view the purpose of grammar. The purpose is not to be able to talk without errors or to talk like a native speaker. I'm still going to teach the present perfect, but the aim is not to use it exactly like a native speaker does. My aim is to help the learner use the same norms, okay, and be able to transform them in any way possible, because the way they can transform them cannot be pre-specified by me. I can't predict every possible context, but I can teach them that they can do that and try to get them familiar to this process. What does transforming the norm means in ELF discourse? It means, for example, changing an idiom. It means changing grammatical forms, or it means changing my phonology. I've seen a video, for example, recently, where the speaker wanted to refer to a city in France named Cannes, okay? And it's written, C-A-N-N-E-S. This is how it's written. In Greek, we say that town, that city in France, we name it Cannes. Okay, in Cannes. There's a huge festival, okay, the film festival in Cannes.
Yes. Mm-hmm,
okay,
mm-hmm.
But the other person did not understand the word Cannes. So he said, oh, Cannes. And then he understood what that city was. So he intentionally changed the typical British pronunciation of that town. And he did that on purpose. You see, he transformed the norm here. He transformed the form. He used the norm, but he didn't stick to that.
Mm-hmm.
He used it in order to accommodate to what the other person was needing at that point.
To make himself understood, right?
Yes.
Well, we say
Yes.
can is actually Brazilians would also say canis, Stefania.
You see?
Yeah,
You
not
see?
can as you say in English.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yes. Because this is how we create a common ground among us.
Mm-hmm.
The norm here doesn't suit us. So we need to transform that. This is an ability, this is a skill that we don't teach, do we? We don't. This is how we view the linguistic aspect, in ILF awareness. We keep what we did, but we add some things to that. I'm not sure if I have replied to your question.
Oh, I simply couldn't agree more. Many thanks for your answer.
Okay,
Juliana
Julie, I think Julie has a comment. Julie, why don't you, where is she? Julie?
Hi, I was trying to avoid coming on camera.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so basically I wanted to know more. I think I missed when you told us about Backbone, what it was, if it was a book series or some product of a project of somebody who was developing some ALF-aware material. So I wanted to know what that is, because I really liked how it did some sort of meta communication work, like people were communicating and talking about communication and how it works, and making them aware of the process, I believe is very, very helpful. So I loved the idea, and I'm working with something similar at the moment. So it would be very helpful for me to know where to find it.
If you Google the Backbone project and the leader's name, who is Kurt Kohn, who's a very well-known ELF expert. So a few years ago,
remember Kurt, don't you? Sorry, Stefania. You remember Kurt from Germany? Kurt Kohn? Julie?
No, not by his first name. No, I know Kohn like as an author from reading. But
I do remember Kurt Kohn.
Yes.
He talks about the My English, right?
My
The position
English
of My
perspective.
English. Yes,
So
yes, My English perspective.
It's Backbone project, right?
And what they did was brilliant. They created, a few years ago, they created corpora, audio-visual corpora, from many areas, including an ELF corpus. Okay, so they had video interviews with people where you could see ELF happening in action, and you could use that video, for pedagogic purposes. So I actually used 2 videos there and created activities for my learners, for my students.
Oh, so the activities were created by you? Yes,
the activities were created by me, but I used the video that they provided. And they also provided a transcript, which was especially helpful.
Yes.
And I created the activity for my learners to be able to identify the strategies or other features, for example, regarding intelligibility and so on, in pronunciation features and other things, for them to be able to observe how it worked in that particular interaction between Fanny or Bazak and the interviewer. And it was a very nice experience for them and for me, of course.
Yeah, I think it seems very, how would I say, productive. I would imagine that the students would be aware what is happening when people are talking, what are you doing with language? Not only what you're saying, but what you're doing. So when you say like, why are they repeating themselves? What do they want to achieve with that? And I think the more we work with that awareness, the more students will be able to apply those strategies in their lives.
The key thing here is that the students already know. They already know how repetition works because they use it. They already know what paraphrasing means when using ELF. They already know that they have to accommodate to what they, but they do it instinctively. They do it by instinct. Okay, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when in the classroom you forget about these things, they feel that the English lesson in the classroom has nothing to do with what they do in real life. So they feel that these are two different worlds. The one where you have to study English, and the one that you actually use English.
Mm-hmm.
So what will they be more interested in? What do you think?
Yeah.
Studying or
But
using?
again, Stefania, of course, the environment outside, especially in multilingual environments, I think it prompts students to be much more aware to this discussion, because you talked about it and you bring this in the text.
Mm-hmm.
This extra linguistic awareness to be discussed in class is extremely productive. And I think the more multilingually aware, or the more students experience this in class, outside, the better to make the class. So this transition to the classroom would be much faster and much more productive. In our case, and then Julie can complement, in our case, sometimes this becomes a little difficult, because despite the fact that we are exposed to English, through the media, and also, all kinds of communication resources. So once they step, at least in our context, once they step outside, they go into a monolingual, in quotes, world, you see? So they are exposed just to Portuguese. And then sometimes I think this transition may take more time, and then maybe, of course, it's not impossible. It will never be impossible once the teacher, works towards that line. But I think it facilitates a lot when they experience this outside, you see? So I think it's one more advantage in this case, yeah. Julie, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to just say that I believe that the work that we do when we call their attention to something that is already instinctive, as you said, in communication in general, what we're doing is we are removing the stigma that this is actually a problem with their language. Like when people paraphrase something, when people ask for clarification, we do that naturally in any language that we speak. But the thing is, when you do that in the classroom on purpose, or when you call people's attention to it as something that is a resource, it's not something that people are doing because they lack language. It's because they actually are doing communication really well, So you remove the stigma that paraphrasing, asking for clarification, and repeating yourself, etc., is actually a sign of lack of proficiency. It's the opposite. In ILF, it shows that you are very competent. So I think it's really, really useful to draw their attention to the instinctive part of communication when they're learning another language.
Right. That's why the meta-linguistic knowledge is extremely interesting, right? And important. Yes,
and this is also the reason why critical reflection is also important, because you talked about the stigma, okay? What happens when you paraphrase? Remember, moving from what to how and why. So you ask the learner, what happens when you paraphrase? And then he responds, okay, I say that in a different word, what I want to say, but I also feel bad about that. And then you ask, okay, explain that to me. How exactly do you feel? What makes you feel this way? And then he starts explaining things. Okay, I feel that the other person thinks I'm not a good English speaker. I think that this is not what I should be doing. I should have remembered the English rule that I learned at school, or I should have known better vocabulary, or a million other things. And then you ask, why? So why is that a problem? Why is that something that you need to be careful of next time? Asking questions regarding why is a psychological trick, okay? Let's say a psychological process in order for you to be able to discover and to identify your own thinking, to identify your own assumptions underlying your thinking. And this is how you see that this stigma is not a big deal after all. Because even if I tell the students that it's okay if you make mistakes, that it's not enough. They need to understand that themselves.
True.
As learners, I don't have to indoctrinate or lecture them into being or into feeling liberated or emancipated or anything. It's not a lecture. You have to feel it yourself. And this is why reflection together with metalinguistic awareness is so important for every context.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Danielle, Lou, and I think we have a comment from the YouTube channel in the, well, it's almost time to finish. Stefania must be tired at this point. 2 hours just flew by, you see? My goodness. Lou, anything?
No, I don't think so. We don't have many comments on YouTube. Just one comment from Luciana. She's thanking us for, she's thanking Savio and Stefania for the great discussion about health awareness. She says that it inspires and encourages us to integrate this perspective in our English teaching. So she's thanking us for this morning with, just 2 hours, as Savio said, like, goes like it flies over, it's really fast.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Great. Stefania, before we close, if you would like to say something about the conference in December.
Yes.
And
yes,
then we go towards the end. Of course, I will thank you again, and we take one picture with everybody till the end.
It's on December 4th and 5th, right?
Yes, we have added. First of all, you're all invited. Okay, you know that as well to your audience as well. Everybody's invited to our conference on health awareness on early December, 3, 4, and 5 December. We have added one more day because of the massive number of the big number of submissions that we received. It's going to be 2.5 days, full of presentations, full of plenary talks, full of roundtables. We are very honored, to welcome Professor Widerson, Seidelhofer, to have two roundtable discussions. We're having Savio with us. We're having Thelma Jimenez as a plenary speaker, Alessia Colgo, Martin Dewey. We're having Alexis Kokos from the Hellenic Open University, who is an expert in transformative learning, because this is what we need to focus on in the field. What happens in our minds when we transform our assumptions, and what's the relevance to ELF and then to health awareness.
Juliana is going to present also.
Yes.
And I think
Lucia has presentations there.
Poliana and Jaciara will also present, right, Poliana?
Yes.
Great. So it's going to be a truly global conference. This is great. This is great.
We have a great, a very significant presence from Brazilian colleagues, bringing together, all the perspectives that we have been talking about in Enrich and in the ELF field altogether, because we have very similar contexts, and we're so much looking forward to this conference.
Yes, that's great.
It's going to be full online, and if you
free, right?
And free, yes, of course, and free of charge.
Yes, this is the best part.
This,
And
this
we
is the
know, of
best
course,
part.
we know the effort that you are making to put all this together, and it's going to be a pleasure to be with so many great scholars and friends. So until we can meet in person again, right? So it's been
Yes,
2 years
we
already.
were.
So so then we are dying to get together and see one another. I think this day arrives soon.
Hopefully in Taiwan next year, because this is where the
last one
conference
was
is
to
going.
happen, right? It was in Taiwan.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
let's
We'll
see.
see.
Let's see. The problem is that
Well,
Taiwan is very far from here, so, and then we don't know. We have to check, and depends a lot on other factors. But anyway, we'll be together in December for sure. And
Yes.
Stefania, if you could send me the slides, I'd love to keep them as part of
course.
our records. So,
Sure.
and it's 12 sharp here, 6 o'clock in Crete. So
Yes.
I would like to thank you immensely once again for this wonderful presentation, for this great interaction with us. It's always a pleasure to be with you and so many great scholars and friends that we have in different parts of the world to be sharing, bracing together for one cause, which is working with language education, right? So if you want to say thank you, Luciellen, for controlling the technological part, and Poliana, Julie, Danielle for being with us, and also the people, the colleagues that are following us on YouTube. So in 15 days, because of schedule, we are having with us Julia Hüttner from Vienna, from the University of Vienna, and she's going to talk about CLIL and ELF. So then I hope you can be with us, Stefania, but I will announce, and you know Julia, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so she was in Southampton, Julie, for her PhD, and now she's back to Vienna, and we will be together on the 5th of November. I wanted to be later, but she was busy with other plans. But I think we are going to share. We're going to read her chapter in the ELF handbook, which is basically CLIL and ELF.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
So everybody is invited.
That's a brilliant paper, and very informative. Because clearly is I think it's the future right now.
And it is spreading, although here is still in the private sector, but it's spreading, and hopefully this will be more democratized, at least in our context. It will be, I think, will be great too. Yeah. Well, Stefania, if you want to say, yes, we too. So if you want to say final words, but when Luciellen turns off, stay with us so we can take a picture together. All right. But thank you again. Yes. It was lovely, as I expected. So thank you for taking your time and being with us. So if you want to say a few last words for today, of course.
Thank you. No.
It will be great.
Thank you. Just a big thank you to you personally, Savio, Luciellen, and Poliana, Daniel, who was had some troubles with his connections, as far as I can see, but he's always here and helpful. Thank you to everybody for this discussion. I'm sorry if I have talked too much.
No.
You know, this is something that I need to critically reflect on. See you next time, and I wish we could all, have this kind of communities, in our universities, this kind of peer learning, okay, and fruitful discussions among colleagues, on a regular basis, because this is what a learning community involves. And you were the best ones to actually put it into practice first, because let's not forget Paulo Freire and all this tradition that he has left Brazil and the whole world. So I wouldn't expect anything less from you.
Thank you, Stefania. Thank you very much. So that's what we have to do. We cannot go on this, being in our ivory towers, right? On the contrary, this is what makes us strong, getting together, forming communities, reflecting together. And despite the differences that we have, but we have lots of things in common. And then we learn a lot from one another. So thank you again. And I hope we can see you in 2 weeks. Okay?
Yes, definitely.
All right. So Lou, if you want to stop recording.
Okay, I'll do stop. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
Daniel.